For 20 years, we've been creating innovation in the CX industry, and now we're seeking out brilliant new perspectives on CX you just won't find anywhere else. I'm Richard Owen. Welcome to the CX Iconoclast. Don Peppers is, and I think this term is actually justified, a legend in the customer marketing field. After his early career at Saatchi & Saatchi, he built a gold-plated reputation in the advertising industry as a rainmaker, as much a Don Draper as a Don Pepper, if you like. And his famed collaboration with Martha Rogers was then kicked off with the book, The One-to-One Future, which is widely credited with actually initiating the entire CRM as a marketing strategy. But he and Martha ultimately went on to publish at least 10 more books. I actually lost count, with over 1 million copies sold. And of course, the Peppers and Rogers Group, one of the most innovative and respected consulting firms in the whole customer management industry. Don steered our conversation towards the challenge of short-term financial thinking as the biggest single obstacle to companies realizing value through customer strategies, which at first struck me as a somewhat disheartening observation, given that it's hardly a new topic or perhaps even a new problem. But at the same time, he shares quite an optimistic view about the evolution of customer experience excellence and the trajectory of business for the future, a trajectory that he also sees as being powered by ever-increasing customer expectations. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Well, Don Peppers, thank you very much for joining me today. It's great to see you as ever.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Richard.
We were just talking in the sort of preamble about a topic which in some ways might get right to the heart of where things are today when people think about customers and customer-centric companies and behavior. And it's this anxiety that we are struggling to break through to the business units and the business leaders, the chief financial officers,
right,
in a language that makes sense. And you've been in this industry a long time. What's the challenge that we're all still running into in sort of getting the importance of customer behavior across?
Good question, and it's I think the biggest challenge that faces CX professionals around the world, and that is that we can measure to the penny the costs of improving a customer experience. You improve that today, but you can only guess at and hopefully predict the revenue impact as the customer comes back for more, recommends others, buys a new product, right? The longer the customer is retained, the more valuable they are. Now, we have a concept for that, which is called the customer lifetime value. And I define it very quickly as the sum total of contributions a customer will make over the lifetime of their patronage, right? But we can't know what that is. We can only guess at it. We predict it with mechanics and statistics. We say that we had 15,000 other customers with this rough profile, and this was what they did. So we know how to do that kind of thing. But if you think about it, it's very much like a stock price. When you buy a stock, you have no idea what that stock is worth, because the stock's value is the discounted net present value of future financial cash flow that stock will generate. Now, in the stock market, we have a market where people argue about what the stock price is, and we settle on, a price that, enough about the same number of people think it's too low as think it's too high. Okay, that's really the price.
Right.
But Myron Scholes, the Black Scholes team, Myron Scholes said Myron Scholes and Fisher Black created the algorithm that helps to value stock option prices. So one of those guys said that they would consider a stock market to be efficient if at any given time a stock price was no more than about twice what its actual value was, and the price was no less than about half of what its actual value was, that would be a relatively efficient market. We have to think of lifetime values like that, okay? You can't know what the lifetime value is. No one can. But we know it's a real number because 20 years from now, we could go back and tell you what it was. We just can't know it now. So my argument with CFOs and financial types is, let's have a discussion about what you think an appropriate level of lifetime value is, and what you think the levers are that might improve that lifetime value or not. I think the lifetime values of customers like this, with this kind of profile, is $800 or $900. And if the CFO says no, 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 I say, well, what do you think it is? It's surely something. We know it's real. So we have those kinds of discussions.
So just getting people to have a conversation about the quantification of the future value of customers would be a step forward. And it strikes me as odd that, as you said, we're very comfortable with the idea that stock prices are a reflection of discounted future values, right? So if you're chief financial officer for any company, you live in this universe, you're used to going to investors and making the argument that future growth prospects, which are highly uncertain fundamentally, are nevertheless something on which you should base the valuation of a company. And maybe it's oversimplified because we just look at multiples because we can't figure out the math. But that's a very comfortable conversation. But when it comes to translating that into the operations of the company, that becomes a lot more challenging for people. And they tend to revert back to current financial performance. Is it fundamentally that leaders in business have trouble connecting the operations of the business, what they choose to do, with potential customer outcomes? So in some ways, they struggle to make the connection between investments they make and good outcomes. And that puts them off. It seems too difficult to make that connection.
It's partly that, but it's also the fact that increasingly the value of a going enterprise is measured in the future goodwill of its customers, not in the value of its assets or productive equipment. In 1980, 95% of the S&P 500's stock market value could be explained by tangible assets, physical things you could see and count, right? And today, over 90% of the value of the S&P 500 is in intangible assets. The primary asset like that is basically the value of customers. It's the value, it's goodwill that you put into an acquisition effort to cover because you're paying $50 million for a company that only has, $5 million worth of ping pong tables and TV screens in their office building, right? So it's a conundrum, but it's one that we're familiar with. And we all we need to do is approach the financial people on terms that they understand.
I wonder whether or not, in some ways, to your last point you made about approaching people in language they understand, I feel like now, looking back, and we've both been in this industry for a long time, there's been a tendency to talk in terms of how can I put it? Very, very emotional language, very empathetic language. We want to do what's right for customers. We want to love our customers, right? There's a tendency to see this as a very mission-driven philosophy, and quantification and financials, not the natural language of the CX professionals. And have we done ourselves a disservice by doing that? Have we wrapped it around a language which undermines the confidence of leadership that this really should be about dollars and cents?
I know exactly what you're talking about, and no, the answer is no. We haven't done ourselves a disservice. Let me give you a quantified way to talk about it, okay? On the whole, my goal as a business is to create the most possible value from every customer, all right? I can't create more value than I can create from the customers I've got available or access to, period. So I want to maximize the value that every customer creates. Great. Now, at what point, okay, is that going to happen? My guess is, this is a hypothesis, but I think it's reasonable to assume that the customer is likely to create the most value for you when he or she thinks that you are creating the most value for them. And when does that happen? When they trust you to act in their interest. That's when you're creating the most value for me as a customer. If I know that if I make a mistake, you'll tell me and help me, recover the funds. What if I am not buying the right product for myself? You'll tell me, then I can trust you. I want to do more business with you, not less. And that's when I create the most value for you. So fundamentally, the financial objective of a business, which is to maximize the value every customer creates, is directly aligned with what we would call the reciprocity principle. I treat the customer the way I'd want to be treated if I were the customer. If that were the motto at every business would be competitively, strong. They would have customers that were loyal.
What's holding companies back from that? Because you could look at 100 mission statements and they'd all say the same thing, right? And they would all tell you, but we know in practice that's not what's being executed. So something's disconnected between the ideal and reality.
Short-term thinking, because fundamentally we've got the accounting systems that all measure the past. So we've set up our remuneration systems based on past metrics that are exact and they can be designed to sort of, help appreciate the future. But the future, what happens in business is that very few business executives who report to shareholders would pass the marshmallow test. You know that marshmallow test that kids take? The marshmallow test. You put a kid down with a marshmallow and say, now listen, son, in 5 minutes, I'm going to come back with another marshmallow if this one is still there. But if you've eaten it, then you don't get another one. And then they go away and they just wait for 5. Executives would flunk that test every time. They always flunk the marshmallow test. That's the problem. There was a survey in the 2010 timeframe. They asked CFOs this question: would you give up real shareholder value to make this quarter's numbers? You know what percentage said they would? 76%. That's the marshmallow test.
So in defense of the marshmallow failures all over the world, this strikes me as a failure of governance, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, we have a system, and the system is that the owners of the business are represented in public companies by boards of directors. And a lot of time and effort is spent coming up with governance structures and reward structures for leaderships of companies. And if the behavior of leaders is suboptimal for the long-term success of the shareholders, then we're not getting our governance structures correct. We're failing at the board level.
Yeah. Well, I think there's good evidence that owner-managed companies are much more likely to take the long-term view because it's the owner's money involved. I mean, and Jeff Bezos, for instance, at Amazon was legendary for disappointing investors who'd wanted a quick hit. But who was right? He was right, right? And the problem that most business people have is not a problem in their psyche or their intelligence. It's a problem with the alignment of the metrics we use to measure success and reward performance, okay, with the long-term nature of the issue, okay? It's that misalignment. It's an alignment problem almost.
And I think I don't dispute anything you're saying. I think that's been true for a long time. But I think that I don't think we can blame the stock market for that. The stock market is very willing to make long-term bets that aren't founded on
Yep.
short-term financials. In fact, you could argue
Mhm.
that it gets very carried away with itself, making long-term bets that aren't linked to short-term financials. So
Yes.
there's no shortage of capital ready to pursue uncertain future returns. And if you look at private equity, which has become an increasingly large part of the financial ecosystem, private equity companies are okay. Maybe they're only looking at a 5-year, 6-year horizon, but nevertheless, they have a very clear imperative to focus on that kind of multi-year return. They certainly want to put
Right.
in place programs that achieve that, and they've got a very strong value creation focus. Um,
Mhm.
so it seems like the infrastructure is there to take place. Is it that we simply haven't evolved the right approaches to measurement, governance, thinking about how we control corporations, how we measure companies? I mean, because there's a will, isn't there? I mean, it's
Yeah.
when and you see this behavior by executives, which is short term. Um, is it simply that boards lack the tools to do the job?
That's a good question. I don't know. My feeling is that companies need to have cultures that are explicitly designed around this this long-term view of their business. You want to be you want your mission statement to be embraced by everyone, but you want that mission statement to transcend the business model so that you're always on the lookout for the benefit that you can give to customers for money, right? Um, Really good example is Blockbuster Video. Blockbuster Video was a fantastic company, very, very successful. And their corporate mission was to be the very best video rental store you could have anywhere. And they were, okay, until streaming came along. What if their mission that everybody bought into, what if their mission had been, we want to deliver videos to consumers as quickly and efficiently and inexpensively as possible? That's our mission. Then they would have been Netflix. There would be no Netflix. It'd be Blockbuster streaming service. So you want to you want to you want to be sure that people agree on what the direction of success is. If the direction of success is building earnings for the revenue report for the quarterly or annual meeting, then that's a short term, very specific, but not really broadly useful mission, right? A mission statement that has the benefit of the customers, that the benefit that you're selling to customers, the thing that you're doing to create value in the world. If that's your mission, then that's much more powerful, and you can
And
unite
that's
people around a long-term view, I think.
and that's gonna survive changes in
Yeah,
technology, because if you're driving towards an intrinsic value for
yeah,
people, right, then
yeah.
that's not going to fundamentally change, right?
No,
At the end of the day, the mechanisms may change, but the mission survives, and so you've got that context you can keep bringing everything you're doing back to, and
right.
that gives people a sort of north star. So you're suggesting, in some ways, a lot of businesses lack that sense of purpose that's linked to creating value for
To the
customers.
customer, link to the customer, value, creating value for the customer. That's the thing here. Um, I sometimes in my lectures I say, what you want to be Apple, not AOL. Okay, AOL was maniacally focused on the revenue stream that came from the subscriptions, and even if they're legendary for having tried to prevent people from quitting, signing up for the wrong plan, and they've but Apple is legendary for always trying to be on the customer's side, okay, helping the customer navigate the digital world in a faster, easier manner, and they even once had their stock downgraded once by some stock analysts when they were bringing out I forget what the chip was. It was a chip that could also deal with Microsoft.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, and it was late, so the chip was late, and the analysts downgraded it, but one analyst upgraded it because they said they had called Apple and said we want that Microsoft chip, and they said, well, if it's late. If you wait for another quarter or maybe 2 quarters, we can sell it to you and you'll save your. And they said, well, what kind of company would do that? Turn away a $5,000 sale simply because it was the right thing to do. It's a company that's going to be around for a long time. That's what kind of company.
I think that it's interesting what you say, but we could have had this conversation. We probably did have this conversation 10 years ago or 15 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, what's changed, if anything? So when you look back now, and we all have the benefit of being able to sort of see a long enough arc of history to see how things are changing. When you look at today's environments and the way people are thinking about customers and creating value for customers, what's new under the sun from your perspective, if anything?
Oh yeah, I think a lot is new, and I think there's no question about the fact that the quality of the average customer experience across all categories is fantastically better today than it was before, than it ever has been. Things are more convenient, they're faster, they're easier, they're more accurate, they're functional better, and the reason surveys have shown customer satisfaction staying kind of steady and not rising substantially, I think, is because it's based on expectations. The better the customer experience is, the better I expect it tomorrow and the next day. But the fact is, the customer experience is much better today than it was, when we were kids. Okay, it's much better.
And it might just be that the high watermark keeps getting reset by leaders, right? So in some ways, Amazon has changed everyone's perspective about what logistics means. And it wasn't that long ago when you order a product and it said, oh, we'll ship within 2 weeks, and people thought, okay, 2 weeks is pretty normal, right? And now the idea that you get near instantaneous supply chain fulfillment has become extremely established, and people apply that standard universally. They expect that.
Right. Yeah. And when Martha and I wrote our first book, The 1-1 Future, one of the chapters was all about home delivery. It was called Take Products to Customers, Not Customers to Product. And we predicted, in 1993, we predicted there would be a tremendous surge in home deliveries within hours, not even days. And people thought that was nuts, but it's happening. And why? Because the better the technologies become, the more demand there is for that kind of service. And it's today we think it is routine. I think whether or not a drone will ever bring my TV to my apartment, okay, who knows? But the truth is, it's getting easier and easier, faster and faster, and more frictionless for me to get the things I want to have a good life as a consumer.
And you talk about expectations, and I think this is the most important point here, which is everything is relative to expectations, right? We have as buyers, whether it's in business to business or business to consumer, we calibrate everything relative to expectations. What we thought was good or good enough has changed, and so if the bar keeps raising and getting better, it benefits collectively everyone in society. We all get much better. Does it also suggest, though, that we've become much more fine tolerances now, right? As businesses, we have to run companies to a level of efficiency which we'd have considered sort of unheard of 20 years ago, right? In terms of the level of execution. And I think of companies that are in atoms not bits businesses, manufacturers who have to execute at extremely high levels of performance. And one of the things that we learned during the COVID period was that disruptions to supply chain hit very hard because of those same tolerances. We've reduced our margin for
Right.
error significantly. And
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point.
companies, the software businesses have an innate advantage. They're very flexible if you have virtual products. But meanwhile, in the world of atoms, you've still got to move things around the world. You've still got to
Right.
build supply chain. It's a challenge. It's a more
Yeah.
challenging time than
Yeah.
it was, right?
Yeah. There's no Moore's law for bulldozers.
Right, right,
Doesn't work.
exactly. Or
Right.
airlines, or
Yeah.
anything where
Right.
physics gets involved. It becomes
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
more. It becomes much more difficult.
Yeah.
I
But
was.
it.
I
Mhm.
Sorry. Go ahead, Don.
Well, I was going to say, yes, it's much more challenging, but businesses are still doing it all the time. The whole theory of mass customization, the digitized production of physical products. You know, I tell my students, mass customization is to customization what the DVD is to the vinyl record, right? Uh, Technically, I could customize something much more accurately, but the DVD or the CD is so finely cut in bits and bytes that it's not even detectable to the human ear. And I think over time, manufacturing is going to be more and more like the CD player as opposed to the vinyl record.
Interesting. Probably the industry that's going to have to go through the biggest revolution because
Yeah.
their products are getting much more complicated. It was interesting. I was reading about the increase in costs of insurance right now. So the insurance industry is experiencing very high increase in cost. And a lot of it's because your average motor car is no longer a simple product. It now has
Right.
thousands of semiconductors involved, right? And it is
Yeah.
now a
Yeah.
software product. And you could
Mhm.
argue that Tesla, in some ways, has internalized this much faster than just about any other
Oh
manufacturer.
yeah,
They understand
I
their
agree.
software business.
Yeah.
You could even make the case that BYD, the Chinese company that's one of now the world's largest manufacturer of electric cars, which comes again from a software industry perspective, understands that cars are really platforms for software.
Right.
And so we now have much more complex products. We now have many more dimensions of customer experience. And we now have a less transactional view of customers, right? So all
Right.
of these things point to a different type of thinking in management. Are we just struggling
Yes.
to catch up with that as the world
Yeah.
just moves faster in our ability to manage it?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And software as a service is just the leading edge of it's going to pretty soon. Every product is going to be connected to the internet, connected to the manufacturer, and they're going to help you adjust the toaster the right way, or the refrigerator is going to remind you that you're low on milk. Things like that are going to happen, and products themselves, physical products, are going to be more and more um, connected and intelligent, and they will anticipate your needs as a customer. So I see that as a pretty bright future. I think for businesses, it means that every business is going to be in what they call the success management business soon, right? When a when a business used to install a big customer database, they had to go to Oracle or somebody like that, and it would take 6 months or a year, and you have to spend thousands, if not millions of dollars on your own servers. And now you can go to Salesforce or somebody else and pay a few $1,000s and have the software already, because they're running the software and they can see how you're using the software. Well, that's the way all companies are going to be in the future, with all these, even consumer products. I'll get a message from somebody saying, if you took a little more time with a TV remote, you could do it this way, or something like that. But they'll coach you, and I think as the world becomes like that, business executives have to get used to the idea that they are going to be held accountable for their customers' happiness. If I'm not happy and it's because I'm not using your product, I'm going to want to know, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, so the mission of the company to some extent evolves from this legacy concept of, we're doing okay, we're meeting the basic standards, we're creating satisfaction because at the end of the day, products, they work
Right.
reliably. It's almost a sort of industrial revolution, well, post Second World
It,
War mentality of,
yeah.
we're
Yeah.
doing well enough, to an environment where at the end of the day um, we have to create success, perhaps is the right term for business to business, delight maybe in consumer context, but the bar just gets raised much higher now for companies.
Yes.
and and
And
and maybe that's the whole point. At the end of the day, we started talking about what's changed over the years, and you said expectations. Maybe the way to internalize that for people who are thinking about running their companies is resetting the bar. Right, this is the time to be rethinking what good enough is going to be, what success is going to
right.
look like. And it's not the time to be backing off that. It's the time to actually be stretching expectations and reaching much further than companies have historically done.
And let me just make one more suggestion. I agree with you 100% on what you just said, but I would argue that a lot of companies haven't yet really glommed on to the idea that the actual mechanics of the marketing and selling process are changed radically by interaction with individual customers. You know, it's not that I make a product, I try to find as many customers as I can to buy it anymore. It is, I interact with you, you tell me what you want, and I make it for you that way. I do it that way. I change how I treat you, but not him, but you. I'm changing the way I treat you. Now, the more you interact and tell me about how I can treat you differently, and the more I'm able to do that, the more loyal you're going to be to me. Because even if my competitor could do the same, customization that I'm doing, you have to first teach him what you've taught me, right? So you're locked in almost. The more context that you can build in an individual customer's relationship, the more loyal that customer is going to be to you in the long term. And I can't say that any stronger. It's a very, very different world than it was in the world of advertising, where you make a product and you advertise it to everybody, and you see how many people buy it. And now a business has to be intimately involved in the customer's own usage and consumption of the product. And when I was in the advertising business, long before interactivity, there was a truth that we knew. The fastest way to kill a bad product is with great advertising. Because as soon as everybody tries it, it'll be dead, right? But that's not the way advertising works anymore. That's not the way marketing works anymore. We're intimately involved in our customers' consumption process, okay? We want that process to be successful, to make them happy, to satisfy their need, whatever need that was.
Which
Very
also
different
means
world.
we've got to be a lot more thoughtful about who we sell our products to. Because at the
Exactly.
end of the
Exactly.
day, if we're not going to build successful companies if we don't understand the likelihood that that customer is going to be delighted before we just sell it. Indiscriminate selling of products not going to create lifetime customers. It's simply going to create very short term wins. But
And a
I think
short-term
that's
business.
a bigger lesson for the marketing community than we probably have time for today. Don, as ever, this fascinating conversation. We just head off and it goes in really interesting directions.
Hope I didn't take you on too wild a ride, but thank you.
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think it's exactly the right topic to be talking about. I just have to point
Good.
out that, as
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, the right behind you in chronological sequence is
Yes.
your collection
Yes.
of books there. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the
This
for
is
those on video,
this is the first book we wrote, Martha and I, One-to-One Future, and this is the most recent one, which is the fourth edition of our textbook. And these books up here are these books in foreign languages. Our books have been published in 35 countries and 17 languages, and
Well,
it's been a real honor to.
it's a testimony to your endurance, but also your ability to stay original and contemporary as things have gone by, right? And it takes a lot of effort to create a book, but it also takes even more effort to create the thought processes and stay on top of it. And congratulations for
Thank you.
what's been a
Thanks, Richard.
remarkable contribution over time. And thanks again for taking the time to join us today and share your
Ciao.
observations.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to the CX Iconoclast from OCX Cognition. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss any of our thought-provoking conversations. And please get in touch if you want to learn more about what OCX Cognition's predictive CX analytics platform can do for your business by providing complete insights into every account, continuously updated and connected to operations. You'll find contact info in the show notes.